So what is Operation Paperclip? It's a story that begins in the ashes of World War II, a time when the world was just beginning to process the horrors of Nazi crimes. Concentration camps, mass graves, and the devastating toll of 6 years of global conflict. And yet in this very moment of moral reckoning, the United States quietly launched one of the most controversial programs in its history. Instead of putting hundreds of German scientists on trial for their involvement with Hitler's war machine, America secretly shipped them across the Atlantic, gave them new homes, and set them to work. These weren't just any scientists. Some had been members of the Nazi Party. Some had overseen brutal experiments. And yet they were embraced because they had knowledge the U.S. desperately wanted. The program was called Operation Paperclip. The basics. Operation Paperclip began in 1945, just as the war ended. It was managed by the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, which later became the CIA, along with the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA. Its goal was simple: recruit Germany's top scientists before the Soviet Union could. These men were experts in rocketry, aeronautics, chemistry, and medicine. The paperclip name came from the system of marking desirable scientists' files with a paperclip, even when those files contained troubling Nazi affiliations. The logic was clear. The Cold War was beginning, and America needed every advantage it could get. The Soviet Union was racing to capture the same scientists. If America hesitated, Moscow would claim them instead. How it worked. As Allied troops advanced through Germany in 1945, they discovered stockpiles of advanced technology: jet aircraft, long-range rockets, nerve agents, and unfinished prototypes that seemed decades ahead of their time. The jewel of these discoveries was the V-2 rocket, the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile. It had been used by the Nazis to bombard London and Antwerp, killing thousands. The man behind it was Wernher von Braun, a brilliant engineer who had joined the Nazi Party and held the rank of SS officer. Von Braun and his team of rocket scientists were captured by American forces and quickly moved to the U.S. They were put to work designing rockets for the U.S. Army. Within 2 decades, von Braun would be leading NASA's Saturn V program, the rocket that took American astronauts to the moon. But rockets were only part of the story. Hubertus Strughold, later known as the father of space medicine, was accused of overseeing experiments on prisoners at Dachau, where inmates were subjected to freezing conditions and low-pressure chambers. In America, he helped develop protocols for astronaut survival in space. Arthur Rudolph, who had managed V-2 production using forced labor from concentration camps, became a senior NASA manager. He helped oversee the Saturn V project before being quietly forced out of the U.S. in the 1980s when his Nazi ties resurfaced. Kurt Blom, a Nazi doctor who had experimented with biological weapons, was also brought over, despite being indicted for war crimes. The U.S. intelligence community often scrubbed or falsified records to make these men appear less culpable. Nazi Party memberships were erased. SS affiliations vanished. Files that once described crimes against humanity were rewritten as no evidence of significant wrongdoing. History/origins. The roots of Operation Paperclip were planted before the war even ended. By 1943, the Allies were already planning how to exploit German science. Both Washington and Moscow knew that Nazi research in rocketry, jets, and chemical weapons was far ahead of the rest of the world. When the war ended in May 1945, the scramble began. Soviet forces moved into eastern Germany and captured entire factories, research labs, and personnel. They deported thousands of scientists and engineers to the USSR in a program called Operation Paperclip. The U.S. responded by accelerating Paperclip. Between 1945 and 1959, more than 1,600 German scientists and engineers and their families were relocated to America. They worked at places like Fort Bliss, Texas, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and later NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. Impact/legacy. The legacy of Operation Paperclip is a paradox. On one hand, it propelled the U.S. into the modern era. Von Braun's Saturn V rocket remains one of the most iconic achievements in human history. Without it, the Apollo program might have failed. Paperclip scientists also contributed to military technology, from guided missiles to advanced aircraft designs. On the other hand, it forced America to compromise its own values. Some had used slave labor, overseen experiments on prisoners, or designed weapons that terrorized civilians. And yet they were given new lives, comfortable jobs, and even U.S. citizenship. When the truth emerged in the 1970s and 80s, it sparked outrage. Congressional hearings revealed how far officials had gone to conceal Nazi pasts. Holocaust survivors expressed horror that men tied to their suffering had been welcomed into American society. Operation Paperclip helped shape the Cold War arms race, the space race, and ultimately the balance of power between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Random facts. Wernher von Braun once dreamed of space travel as a child, building homemade rockets before being recruited by the Nazi regime. At one point, von Braun was arrested by the SS for focusing too much on space exploration instead of military weapons. Hitler personally released him. The Soviets captured an entire rocket production facility and rebuilt it on Russian soil, forcing German engineers to work there for years. Von Braun later appeared on Walt Disney's TV specials in the 1950s, cheerfully explaining rocket science to American families. By the time of the moon landing in 1969, many Americans had no idea the rocket's chief architect had once worn a Nazi uniform. Conclusion. So, what is Operation Paperclip? It was America's secret mission to take Nazi scientists and turn them into Cold War assets. It gave us rockets, missiles, and the Apollo program. But it also revealed a troubling truth, that in the race for power, morality can be bent and history rewritten. Operation Paperclip is both a story of human progress and a reminder of its cost. If you also like learning random things, subscribe. You have found your happy place. Poem, Paperclips and Shadows. A paperclip marked a chosen name, a past of fire, a future of flame. Forgotten crimes in hidden files, rebranded truths and practiced smiles. The moon was reached, the stars were won, but ghosts still linger in the sun. For paperclips can bind the page, but not erase the past's dark cage.